For a broader look at the French political landscape and how it's changing, we reached Thomas Vitiello, a scholar and teacher of political science at Sciences Po, or the Paris Institute of Political Science. First, Thomas, from your perspective, what can be learned about French voters from last week's result?
Well, the results of last Sunday's election show that there is a deep wish among French voters for a renewal of the political class. If we look at the collapse of the two traditional parties, the Socialist Party on the left and the Republican on the right, we see that if we sum up their votes, we reach 26% of the electorate. 5 years ago, both parties got 55% of the vote, and 10 years ago they got 66% of the vote. So we went from 2/3 of the vote concentrated on the candidates representing the two traditional political parties of the left and the right, and now we only reach 1/4, 26% of the vote. So there is really a deep, wish among the French voters for renewal of the political class at the moment.
When you talk about renewal, if you look at the two candidates still in the race, Macron and Le Pen, what kind of renewal do you think they offer?
Well, both of them presented themselves as outsiders of the political system. So there is this appeal of outsider candidates right now in French politics, but maybe not all in French politics. If we look at Trump, also presenting himself as an outsider of a traditional political elite. And so we see that we have two types of outsiders. We have outsiders that come from radical parties, Marine Le Pen on the extreme right, but also Jean-Luc Mélenchon on the extreme left, that perform extremely well by reaching 19% of the vote, which is 8 points more than 5 years ago. But then also Macron, who presented himself as an outsider, as he did not, he was never a member of a political party, did not do a career within the political parties, but as a mixture of experience from the private sector and the public sector. And so he was able to present himself as an outsider from traditional political parties.
The other part of this, and some other observers have said that this election is about what it means to be French. Do you see that in the issues?
I wouldn't say so. The issue of national identity was really an issue in the 2007 election when Nicolas Sarkozy put the issue at the center of his campaign, and he even said that France, you love it or you live it. And so he emphasized the necessity for foreigners, for immigrants to assimilate and to adopt French values, Republican values. And on the other side, you had Ségolène Royal, the candidate of the Socialist Party, that spoke about a mixed blood republic, acknowledging the multiculturalism of French society. I will say that in 2017, the key issue of this election has been the relationship to economic globalization. Similarly, as it was during the Brexit vote in the UK or maybe during the American election last November. And so we have on one side the optimistic and on the other side the pessimistic. You have a piece of a country which is optimistic when it looks at the future, when it looks at economic globalization. On the other side, you have a part of the population which is pessimistic about it, pessimistic about its own future and fearing to lose their status. And therefore, when you look at the vote in favor of Macron, you see a lot of managers and rather people who live in urban centers, people who benefit from globalization, and the voters of Marine Le Pen are concentrated in the region that are economically struggling because of international competitions and rural areas, or who feel like they are left out of the globalization process. Therefore, we can maybe summarize the cleavage between the winner and the loser of globalization for this election.
This is obviously a conversation that's going on beyond France's borders, that in other countries in Europe they're looking at similar divisions. Do you think the results of this election will have broader impact in Europe?
Yes, I believe so. According to the results of Sunday's second round election, it might have major ramification at the European level. Obviously, if Marine Le Pen is elected, it might be a blow from which the European Union, as we know it, might not be able to recover. On the other side, if Emmanuel Macron is elected president, then it could be an opportunity to remobilize the European project, but keeping in mind that this might be one of the last chance for the European citizens to actually be heard and to feel like they're not being left out of the integration process and of economic globalization. So it will have major ramifications. It's really, I would say, maybe a tipping point in the European integration process.
And yet this election itself is not the end point. There are parliamentary elections to come after the presidential election. Tell me a bit about the significance of those.
Well, they have never been as significant as they are today, which is a little bit ironic because the reason why they are 2 months after the presidential is because they are considered as secondary to the presidential election. But this year, that's not the case because the government will need to enjoy a majority in the National Assembly that will be elected in June. Therefore, the president will be really able to pursue his agenda only if he has a stable majority in the parliament. And if Marine Le Pen wins the presidential election, it is extremely unlikely that she will have a majority in the parliament, and therefore she might be limited in her action. On the other hand, Emmanuel Macron has launched a new political movement, En Marche, which is only 1 year old. Therefore, we don't know yet if they will manage to get a lot of their members elected, a lot of their candidates elected at the National Assembly. It's a new movement, so we have new candidates, and therefore, even if it performs very well, it might still need to do a coalition with maybe a center-left or a center-right political parties. And therefore, there are still a lot of unknown, a lot of question marks, but we'll have to wait a couple of months to have the final answers to them.
Thank you very much for your expertise on this. You're watching a fascinating time in French politics.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Thank you very much for having me.